when I was reading up on what is it that we should discuss and talk about, and of course the topic is Next in Innovation, it's very interesting that you were the Minister for Culture and Innovation. That's not a concept that we have yet adapted in India. I want to understand from your perspective, how does that work as far as the government's role is concerned? What does a Minister of Innovation really do?
First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. Congratulations for this conference and best wishes for the future. My ministry was called Culture and Innovation Ministry. But in fact, I had many more functions. For example, family policies belonged to the ministry. University systems, research institutions belong there, and even vocational training. And I tell you why. Because in Hungary, when we talk about culture, we are talking about our way of life. It's not just pictures on the wall or music or art. But culture is passed on to the next generation through the families. Obviously, we have the schools, the churches, but predominantly, it's the family. So the culture and the family should be hand in hand. And this morning, we talked about a lot how a government can enable or support families or culture, that we don't lose what we want to keep. So therefore, you need economic prosperity. And in this fast-changing world, where does that come? From the education, from universities, where from the young people can go to corporate life, research life, university life, because through those people, through the elite, can the resources and the assets of a country be mobilized. And therefore, produce added value, economic added value, which in turn is required to support your families and culture. So this is an angelic circle. And the government in Hungary decided that we have to have this holistic view represented in a portfolio in the government. And because in my life I worked in each and every field, I have 4 kids, 8 grandchildren, so I'm familiar with the family to start with.
That's such an interesting perspective, because you say that at the core of culture in Hungary is family and family values. And basis that comes the idea that innovation is critical, because that will lead to economic prosperity, which in turn helps and supports families across Hungary. That's such a brilliant concept, you know, and you've put it out so simply for our audiences to understand. I also want to just know from you then, what exactly does the job entail? How do you go about it when we talk about a ministry of innovation? What sort of innovation are you looking at? And I'll come to what next in innovation, but I want to understand what so far would you say have been some of the biggest success stories?
I think the role of a government is to facilitate what a government can do. The government can provide money to support ideas, infrastructure, or regulation. And the wise governments, in my opinion, build on the strengths, the existing strengths, what a country has. Last year, when I was still a minister, Hungary won 2 Nobel Prizes. Katalin Karikó for the mRNA, and Ferenc Krauss for capturing and picturing the subatomic particles. Well, they've been working on their field for 40 years or so, but it was my time when they got the Nobel Prize, so I take the credit for that. But anyway, so it means that the health sciences and life sciences and physics, chemistry is somehow developed in Hungary in a very strong way. So when first we started to think about how to improve our ecosystem in innovation, we said that we select 3 focus areas. One is digital transformation. And it starts with, Hungary is full of very smart mathematicians, starts with deep mathematics, which is the heart of AI, quantum, you name it. Then green transformation is no question, but in the green, we mean not only energy, but water, agrarian issues, and those things. And last but not least is I would call it the health questions, aging, longevity, pandemics, and these kind of things. So we decided as a government that we will focus our efforts, our money, our infrastructure development, and our regulation to help this ecosystem. And the good thing was that the higher education belonged to me. Today, Hungary has a very strong manufacturing platform. American companies, Chinese companies, German companies, French companies are all there and manufacturing high-tech products. To support that, obviously, we need talents, engineers, and researchers. And in the Hungarian higher education system, some 13% of the students are already foreign students. That's in the top 15 countries in the world, out of the, say, UN 200 countries. While Hungary's size is 95th in population or territory. So we are punching above our weight. But our goal is that by 2030, we will increase this number to 20% plus. Because if you want to develop a strong manufacturing base, you have to have a knowledge base. You have to nurture and develop those engineers and those experts who will be able to work there. Not necessarily just on research. The research ecosystem is important. What we did, that all government money, any penny that is spent on innovation, will be spent on projects where clearly demonstrated that there is a cooperation, association between the corporate sector, research institutes, and universities. Because the university students should see corporate guys walking on the corridors and researchers. MIT in Boston was made based on that idea. So this, focusing on fields, focusing the money to follow the policies, and I would say over the years, and obviously my predecessors, this is a new ministry, but there was Ministry for Innovation, the number of patents, publications grew significantly. So there is a response. We are far away. Just to give you some European numbers, in Europe, the best innovators spend some 3% of their GDP on innovation.
Yes.
2/3 of that usually comes from the private sector, 1/3 from the government. But and in Hungary, we are at around 1.5%. But the very interesting indicator that in Europe, in the best countries like the Netherlands, Austria, and others, they have some 1,000 researchers per 1 million inhabitants.
Oh, wow, okay.
1,000 per 1 million inhabitants. We are 2/3 of way through that. Because most probably you know, ideas happen not when you sit alone at the dinner table, but when you mingle with your colleagues at the printing machine or the coffee shop, because you trigger each other's thoughts.
Mr. Csak, so if I were to summarize it, what I understand is that there is would you say that there's an equal focus that's required on both building the knowledge base as well as having in-house or rather, talent within your country that can convert that knowledge into manufacturing? You were to say to any country, give your opinion or suggestion, what is the weightage that you would give to each of those aspects? How much should a country focus on knowledge and R&D, and how much should one focus on setting up those manufacturing units and other factories and in making infrastructure that actually invites companies from abroad?
Rather than answering how we do it, this morning we heard the former Canadian Prime Minister, and he talked about China's rise, both in manufacturing and in research and innovation. Because the two goes hand in hand. If you look at President Trump's speeches, what he says that in the US, they have to somehow reestablish the American manufacturing base. I have my doubts because the skilled workers are not there, and there are many questions around that. But the US clearly is a leader in innovation and research. Yes. But if you don't have then the application in manufacturing, that you won't have a balance. Now, in Hungary, we woke up, I would say, 15, 20 years ago, and we said that, okay, it's not fancy to have factories, and these are very modern factories, by the way. It's not fancy, but if we want to support the research and create room for the research, we need manufacturing. And we started inviting manufacturing corporations. There are only, I would say, 3-4 countries in Europe where the manufacturing as a percentage of the GDP is above 20%. Wow. 30 years ago, even in the UK, it was 20+%. Today in the UK, it's 7-8%. Mm-hmm. So then you are very much reliant on imports. And think about the pandemic or any disruption in the global value chains. You are in trouble. So you have to have both sides. And I think each country has this potential. I would say the most important is that while politicians create this manufacturing base, in parallel, you have to create the ecosystem that nurtures potential new talents. And that's the universities.
Okay, that's interesting. So that's the university, as you said, for the talent. I will come to that point in just a second, but you also mentioned the slump that the entire world witnessed during the COVID-19 pandemic. In a way, all of humanity was together fighting that pandemic. I want to understand from your perspective, you raised an important statistic about manufacturing as part of as percentage of the GDP, and how it was 20+% many years back. However, it's come down. Do you feel that was the reason why several European nations have actually been facing the economic slump ever since COVID-19 happened, because they didn't give enough emphasis to both the pillars, as you've mentioned, to manufacturing as well as knowledge and R&D?
There were several factors. For example, in Germany, the problem was that the Mittelstand, the mid-sized corporations, the next generation or the third generation is not interested. So they are selling, and most probably the buyers just buy the market and shut down the thing. I think the most critical issue was that in Europe, many people fell in love with the green transition.
Yeah. Yes.
So that meant that manufacturing, and from the US as well, manufacturing went to China and other places. But if you think about in China, the energy production, I would say 80% is from coal. Pretty dirty. While in Europe, it's natural gas or nuclear or that kind of stuff. So when we relocated the manufacturing, we actually worsened the global atmosphere. So, and plus the social problems that local people lost their jobs, tax revenue dropped. So there is a chain of reaction or effect in it. I think we are in India, and we Hungarians, we came from Asia, and we are very proud of that. We think about kind of balances, and each country has to have his or own balance. And India is a special case because you are at this stage of your development where you can make decisions.
Yes.
And you have the economic growth to support the government to create an innovation and culture ministry and focus on creating the potential, both in manufacturing and in education, higher education in particular.
Very interesting, and I want you to help elaborate on that aspect as well. So what role do you think India would perhaps play as far as innovation is concerned in the coming decade, in your experience or in your understanding of where India stands today?
I think the most important thing is association, corporations, research institutes, universities, and governments. But now, thanks God, we are not living in a world where each country is a closed entity. India is in the best position because you have many people who studied in the UK, Europe. We have many Indian students in Hungary as well, US. So I think India is uniquely positioned to be a center of global cooperation. In Singapore, for example, the National University of Singapore 15 years ago or so established a new institute called CREATE. And that was an institute which the role was, and the role is, to invite world-class universities to Singapore to work together with Singaporean researchers. Okay. So Stanford and Munich Technology University and others are there. And that's where you can play a role. I visited Bangalore, the Technical University and the Indian Institute of Advanced Studies. You have huge potential and you have the people who understand the world. Now the question is whether you can bring projects here. Mm-hmm. And you can bring people to live here to see for themselves. For example, I, as a minister, I established kind of scholarships, 3 to 5 years. You can bring your whole family to Hungary and work together with Hungarian researchers, and not only Hungarian researchers,